This program is brought to you by Fresh FM.
I'm Patrick Rose, and you're listening to Before the Flood. That was Red Hill Mining Town from U2 from their Joshua Tree album. Obviously, anyone who's been paying attention to any of the news locally here in the Tasman-Nelson region is well aware of the significance of that choice. Red Hill Mining Town, we have a very, very serious issue put before us as a community over the last week or so. It's come to light that the Grey Wolf Resources Company from Australia with Chinese financing has applied for a substantial exploration permit to explore Golden Bay all the way down the west coast, the entire Farewell Spit, explore for oil, natural gas, and coal. And this is a very, very serious application. It's been given a bit of a nod and a wink from the government. The application has now been put before the iwi. There's a 6-month timetable for the consideration of this application, during which time, once that application is approved, it's a 5-year application for a 5-year validity, during which time the Red Wolf, I've been assured, would be undertaking extreme tests, making sure, doing satellite imagery, looking at the resources and the viability of extracting these minerals. And so this is a very, very serious issue that comes into our community, which is obviously a very ecologically minded community, and also a community that has a very strong focus on tourism. And really, more than anything, this is an issue that cuts to the point of an entire sort of New Zealand-wide issue. We're looking at a country that has defined itself as clean and green, but suddenly here we are faced with a bit of financial hard times, and those principles of clean and green suddenly go out the window, and we see a national government that is actively encouraging mining in areas that obviously have tremendous significance of natural beauty, tremendous significance in terms of sacredness for the Maori and the local iwi, and enormous poetic and spiritual significance for the local population. And so please don't go away. We've got a very, very important show. I've got a phone interview coming up with Edward Lancaster. He's the CEO of Grey Wolf Resources, and he's shared with us some of his optimism about all the different oil and the coal and the natural gas that they're going to find here, and all the different jobs that they're going to bring. I've got Chris Hill from the local iwi. We've got Kevin Haig from the Green Party sharing his thoughts on this, and then also a look at some of the other issues similar to this that are happening around New Zealand. We have Steve Abel from Greenpeace talking about some of their different campaigns that they're coordinating on the East Coast. Anyone who's been paying attention to the national news will know that there's a company called Petrobras, which has been actively pursuing deep-sea drilling off of the East Coast, and there's been a tremendous outpouring of local resistance to this, and that local resistance takes the form of flotillas, and people are really sort of starting to get organized and stand up and say, hey, wait a minute, this is not in any way in line with what the average New Zealander thinks about the way that we need to be exploiting resources. These are complicated issues, people. I mean, we do have financial hard times. I think anyone who's listening will know, not only on a personal level, with things aren't what they used to be. This isn't the 90s. This isn't even the early 2000s where money was easy to come by and tourism was really easy to get. We're looking at hard times globally, and so as a result, we're seeing less tourists. And so we also have a massive earthquake that we're trying to pay for. So we have some serious bills coming, if you will, and I suppose that the rationale of the national government is someone's going to have to pay these bills, and okay, if we have to put some deep sea drilling here, then so be it. And obviously, there's a lot of heated issues in this, and there's a lot of inflammatory language, and there's a lot of emotional language involved here. But I think that fundamentally, this issue has opened up a lot of things, and not just about the world economy that we live in, where we have an Australian company doing the bidding of a Chinese conglomerate trying to get oil and coal just to pump the Chinese economic machine to give us more cheap Chinese, goods, or get more energy so the Chinese can run their factories to produce more low-cost goods. But also we're looking at the whole issue of what is deep-sea oil drilling. We've run out of the easy oil. All the sort of low fruit, if you will, has been picked. And we're now looking at a situation where as we move towards peak oil, which is a subject we often talk about on this show, as we move towards that peak in the oil production, we're going to start to see the price rise, and that price rise is going to make it a lot easier for oil companies to say, oh gosh, well, it didn't make sense to get that oil out of Golden Bay 20 years ago, but oil's at $105 a barrel, people, and it's not going down. And so we're going to start to see oil companies coming further and further afield and drilling in deeper and deeper places. And obviously we all saw the Deepwater Horizon BP disaster, and that was only at 1,500 meters. They're looking at drilling up to 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 meters deep into the sea, and we're looking at a very, very seismically active country that we are in. And so, you know, the people like Greenpeace and the people from the Green Party are asking the questions, well, what do we do if something goes wrong? And I think that we all agree that if, you know, with the Fukushima and the tsunami that we've seen in the last month, things can go wrong, and when they do go wrong, the worst case scenario can be worse than anyone even thought. And so I think this is a really serious issue we're looking at. We're looking at putting oil rigs out into Golden Bay. We're looking at expanding the port of Tarakoe. We're looking at huge extractions of coal up in Puponga. They're talking about expanding the roads dramatically, and there's a huge amount of traffic. Now, obviously, there's going to be jobs here, and some of the jobs are going to be good, and they're going to be well paying. And some of the jobs are going to be specialists that are brought in from abroad, but this is a complicated issue, and the council needs to answer for the fact that they've known about this for over 3 months. Mr. Paul Wylie has known about this for over 3 months and not given any indication to the community. And so Mr. Paul Wylie wouldn't comment on our show, so here we are. We've got, as I say, Edward Lancaster, the CEO of Grey Wolf, coming up next, Chris Hill, Kevin Haig from the Green Party, and then we've got Steve Abel from Greenpeace at the back of the hour. So I'd like to start with the conversation that I had with Mr. Edward Lancaster. He's a very, very interesting fellow. He's a mining man from Australia. He thinks it's entirely hypocritical for New Zealanders to say that we're against mining, because all the New Zealanders that he knows are over there mining and ripping up Australia left, right, and center. So he says we've got to get past this kind of squeamishness and really start to be less hypocritical about what we're doing here. So without further ado, this is the CEO of Grey Wolf Resources. This is the company that has the application in to extract oil, natural gas, and coal out of Golden Bay. And he's talked to us about what that process was like. How did he decide on Golden Bay, and what their process of identifying different sites in the area are going to be like.
To the mining department for an area, they give you a carte blanche area of say 10,000 hectares or 20,000 hectares or square kilometres. We then go over that and take out all the sensitive areas like the Department of Conservation, any tourist spots, any beaches, any iwi land that's there, and eventually we might have a target of 10%. And once we've found that 10% without disturbing the land, we actually then look at it through a satellite situation, data imaging, everything else to know what resources are approximately down there. And then we decide whether it's commercially viable or not, and look at where we've got to get the mineral from. Is it to look at the infrastructure because most of our product will go overseas, of course.
Of course,
and
yeah.
This is the misconception that I'm getting from everybody, that we're going to start mining all the parklands and all the forestry. No such thing, I'm afraid to disappoint you.
Well, it's not a disappointment. It's a great relief to hear that, obviously. But how, obviously some people have done exploratory work here in the past. There's obviously some indication of what sort of resources are available. How big could this potentially be? Could there be?
It could be very big. I'm bringing over a Chinese contingent, my partners from China, in about a week, 10 days' time, which make up a very, very rich party that will fly over the area and then decide the potential that's there, mainly the offshore drilling, because we've looked at old records of drilling off the coast of right down as far as Westport. We've got an application area as far from Golden Bay right down to Westport. And in that, over the years, the various drilling been done, and we have the reports of that drilling, and it in the 60s, it wasn't economical to even look at it. But now, with the price of oil and petrol as it is, there's a lot of potential there. But as far as we're concerned at the moment, mining these days is 90% exploration and only 10% mining.
Yeah, I understand.
You understand that, and so we walk away from a lot of tenements because it's not economical, it's sensitive. But right now we have great hopes for that particular area, especially around Paponga there, you know.
And so,
but that has been a traditional mining spot since, according to historical record, it's been mining coal there since the 18th century, supplying Wellington and Christchurch with coal, but not in great volumes, of course. But some of our indication down there show coal, 1,000-meter thick seams of coal. I mean, that's to excite anybody. A lot of it runs out to sea, but future investigation will prove just how viable it is.
How would you extract coal from under the seabed? Is that a possibility?
Not really. It's probably not economical at this particular stage to do that. This is some of the things we'll take into consideration. I'm sure in the future, with coal rising, when we first started looking at this, coal was about $65 a ton, and a couple of years ago it went to 165. Now it's 300. Now I'm told it'll be 500 by the end of the year. So it's like gold. It's going up in price, and it becomes more viable to mine these areas now.
If things went well and all the permits came through and things looked good from a sort of financial perspective, what kind of jobs could the Bay expect to get out of a deal like this? Or is it really you bring in specialists and they do the work, or is there an actual tangible benefit to a community that does this?
Oh, of course. We will employ thousands of people if we take it to the extent we want to take it, because we're looking at the iron sands off the coast there. We're looking at the as you say, the potential of the petrol licenses. We're looking at developing a port there. No, literally, it will be thousands of jobs there over a period of time, and millions of dollars sort of invested there. But of course, we have a lot of things to do before then. Once we've found the target, once we've found the resource that we want to mine, then of course we have to present it to the mines department and say this is the area we want to mine, and then we have to prove to them we have the financial resources, we have the technical expertise, and then that's another story of them going away and deciding, yes, do we give them the mining license or not.
And are you optimistic, given the more sort of liberal mining permit history under this new national government? Are you optimistic that things might move ahead in the way you hope them to?
Most definitely. If the previous government was in, I wouldn't even be looking at New Zealand. But there is some hope yet with the thinking that this new government has got towards mining. And as I say, please remember, this is not the old-fashioned mining of hit and miss and digging here, digging there. This is high technology. This is where, before disturbing the ground and before we start to mine, we touch nothing. And even when we finish mining, the land is back again normal and probably suitable for perennial crops and for trees, and so the land will be improved. Because I can't see much of a mining life there of more than 10 years in some of the places that we're looking at.
And so, obviously, once you eliminate areas where there's sensitivity, like in the national park or beaches and things like that, and you identify areas that have potential, how do you still try to minimize the impact? Because obviously, putting oil rigs and trucks and bringing in equipment and people and so on is going to have some impact. And there is a lot of tourism in this part of New Zealand, and so I think a lot of people would be concerned that that no matter how sensitively it's done, there's still going to be oil rigs visible off the coast.
believe me, the money obtained from this type of mining far surpasses any tourism that might be in the area. But not only that, we respect that, of course. I mean, one of the things we're going to have to do is to complete that road from Westport to the bay, to the Golden Bay there. This is one of the benefits of the infrastructure we'll be developing. We're looking at developing Westport and this Port Terre Haute to take deep sea carriers. I mean, take for example in Newcastle at the moment, there's 120 carriers, 20 iron ore carriers of 100,000 ton a day waiting to be loaded with coal and iron ore. You know, I mean, so it will probably cause a little bit of disruption, but the benefits far outweigh the disruption it will cause.
What do you say to the people who say, "Gosh, drilling for oil in this day and age is really it's a dinosaur kind of job here. We need to be investing in cleaner alternative energy technologies, and we might get $1 billion worth of oil out of the ground, but we could have many more billions in sustainable alternative energy sources."
Yes, I agree. I mean, most of the coal we take out of the ground will be gasified and export to actually turn it into other types of fuel for hydrogen. And we're working with one of our directors, John Rutherford, is working with the Canterbury University, I think it is, looking at different ways to cut down any carbon emissions that will come from mining, and also to see the various steps that can be taken to make the coal a better project.
And what do you do if local iwis turn around and say, it's great that you're planning on bringing jobs in, but these aren't the kind of jobs that we want, and this actually is going to have a negative impact on this land which we don't agree with. How are you going to deal with that sort of opposition?
Well, at the moment, we've only been tentatively talking to the local iwi there, and they were quite open with our discussions. In fact, I've been invited to another meeting sometime this month to discuss it further with them. But I think it all comes down to money situation. I mean, no matter what people say with tourism, and goodness knows what, money is the end result. And I feel that the resources that we have, or you have, are going to mean a lot of people make a lot of money.
And so, what about individual people within the community? Let's say the iwi come on board for whatever different reasons, but what sort of voice do the people in the community have if they have reservations about new roads being developed or major shipping coming into the bay? Do they have a voice in your equation?
Sure, as long as they're not speaking for the whole of New Zealand, and the government will listen to anybody. But let me put it this way: to say that New Zealand's anti-mining when there's thousands of New Zealand families over here working the mines in Australia, millions of dollars being pumped every day into our resources, into our mining resources here in Australia. The spin-off from the Australian boom in mining definitely influences New Zealand. To say that New Zealand's anti-mining is a bit hypocritical. In many ways, New Zealand is benefiting from mining, whether it's in their country or not.
And so, what's the actual one of the concerns that people have raised is about the deep sea oil drilling. Would any of these sites be potentially deeper than, say, 500 meters?
Well, let's put it this way, that we're not only just after oil and gas, but also the valuable iron sand. There's enough iron sand out there off the coast of Westport and around that area. There's enough iron sand there to feed the whole of the Chinese steel mills for 100 years and still have a lot left over. And it's very economical to mine as well, compared with mining iron ore and that in the Pilbara. So in the future, somebody, whether it's us or not, will take advantage of those resources out there. And let's face it, they're 12 miles out at sea.
That was Edward Lancaster. He's the CEO of Grey Wolf Resources. Used to be Grey Wolf Gold Mining. They've kind of changed their spots a bit and are getting into more competitive areas now that oil is sitting well over $100 a barrel. gold is still at $1,500 an ounce, and we're looking at a huge increase in the technology that is extracting coal and extracting natural gas. There's some incredible information out there on the internet about the huge natural gas explosion that's happening in the United States, and pumping these wells down into the ground, fracturing the shale, and then extracting the natural gas. Obviously, they're using a huge amount of chemicals, 500 plus different toxic chemicals, in order to lubricate the drills and so on to get that natural gas out of the soil. But speaking about Mr. Lancaster, I appreciate him coming on and speaking so candidly about his designs on Golden Bay. He did call it our resources, or resources that we have, and then he's corrected himself, said the resources that you have. You could tell from the interview that he's obviously very, very confident and very, very comfortable with the application as it's moving forward, and that at the end of the day, this is a financial equation. Any reservations that people have individually or collectively in iwi or so on will be overruled, he's confident, by just good old-fashioned common dollars and cents. So obviously this is an issue that is deeply concerning. Things are moving ahead. He says that he's coming here next week with one of his major financiers, and they'll be doing a flyover the entire Golden Bay area. So I had this interview with him, and then I gave a call to our local iwi to say, gosh, is it really true that you had a first meeting with them, and they things seemed to be you were pretty positive about it, as he indicated. Chris Hill from our local iwi was not nearly as confident about how quickly this application is going to go through, nor was she confident about the way that he presented it. So this is Chris Hill from our local iwi here in Golden Bay.
The difficulties we have is that Crown Minerals asked us to be very specific about sites, to say, well, where does it begin and end, and how big is it, and we have to justify why it is, and that's not a Māori way of approaching these things. So we end up between a bit of a rock and a hard place, I suppose, around whether we respond from our own worldview and know that they won't accept that. It's highly likely they won't accept that, or whether we fit the way that Crown Minerals approach these things. So if you look at the recently opened Mataitai reserves out on the coast, where would you say that they begin and end? So you've got a line on the map, but in terms of them being impacted, we'd pick a point further out from where their actual boundary is. It's difficult to put a line in the sand, really. If you look at Onikahua, if you look at the spit, and they've got a line very, very close to the edge of the spit in the intertidal area, and for us, that's not where it's a wahi kapu for us. But that's not where it begins and ends. So there's a point at which we feel like an oil rig or some activity getting nearer to there would have some sort of impact. And I suppose this is our spiritual views about things start coming in here.
And so, I mean, ultimately, everything is sacred, and so it's a very fine line to try to sort of sit down at the table with them and try to make that case. And so is it difficult do you try to sort of compromise and say, okay, well, we'll protect these areas, but the rest we know that the Crown is going to push for?
Well, that's the decision that we make, and we do this over and over again because we've had a lot of applications come to us for various areas here in Mohua, and what we have decided is that we won't compromise our worldview, our values, the principles of Te Ao Māori, really, the Māori world, and of course all of the bay is of importance to our mana. And it's just like asking people to choose your favourite child or that sort of thing. And because something is of utmost importance or, has a lot of mana or is very tapu, it doesn't diminish the value of something else. So it's not we don't come from a reductionist sort of linear way of looking at things. And we could take the approach of thinking, okay, well let's approach this the way that Crown Minerals do and try and get some areas excluded. I'm interested to hear that Grey Wolf are sensitive to this idea, and if they were, if they were genuine about that, then they could easily not apply for that whole area that comes right around our coastline, right up the west coast, right within the estuaries, within Golden Bay, all the way down the coastline of Abel Tasman. They could exclude right now those areas from the application. So I think they're a bit disingenuous, really, to say that.
Well, I mean, at the end of towards the end of the interview, he ultimately said, at the end of the day, money is what's going to make the deciding factor here. And he even suggested that in his discussions with the local iwi that things were extremely promising. But ultimately, he's had some assurances from government ministers that has given him a huge amount of optimism or a positive attitude about this application. And so I was wondering what has been said to Grey Wolf already that's given them, from the iwi side, a sort of a positive attitude about the possibility here.
Yeah, we've had no communication with Grey Wolf at all around this application, so I don't know where they're coming from around that. The iwi here in Mohua, Te Atiawa, Ngāti Raro and Ngāti Tama, are absolutely opposed to this application, and we'll do all that we can to fight it, really. And I've no doubt at all that I'd be highly surprised if Crown Minerals don't approve their application, because that's what they do. And I understand that John Key has recently met with whānau Apanui up north who are in this position, and he said very clearly to them that it's about money and that comes first. So I've no doubt at all that they'll probably get their application approved. And yeah, money wins. But we had seen someone else off here who came in wanting to mine the seabed in Golden Bay, and when they had their prospecting permit approved, and when they realised just how much difficulty was ahead of them in terms of protest and opposition within our whole community, not just from the iwi, they surrendered their permit, which I thought was pretty surprising, really.
And what do you say to the John Keys of the world who say, well, gosh, we've got some major disasters we've got to pay for, earthquakes and economic downturns and housing market collapses and so on. We've got to get some money from somewhere, and so we need to get some jobs, we need to get some revenues to the Crown, we need we can't just sit on our hands and hope that tourists keep coming. We need to diversify a bit. So, you know, this is a hard-nosed business decision, but ultimately it's something that's going to keep New Zealand economy humming.
Yeah, I think it's a simplistic and slightly cavalier approach, I suppose. I mean, there are areas that they could approve for mining. I'm not saying this from an iwi perspective here, you know, that we would agree with any drilling. But, you know, you can imagine there are areas that are way offshore that still would be a risk, I suppose. But this is inshore. This is like right within Golden Bay they're seeking an application for. So, you know, there has to be a middle ground somewhere around that. The other point, I suppose, is that, you know, this government makes decisions around their revenue, and one of them is the change in their tax system, where, you know, I heard or read that something like $14 billion was to be gained from the tax cuts, so that really advantaged the people who were earning the most money. So those are the decisions that our government makes. So it's a bit difficult to take this into a simplistic sort of isolated thing of, oh, well, we need money, so we need to mine. And wouldn't it be great if our government was forward-thinking, consider alternative ways of generating power? It's a bigger picture than we need money, we need to mine, and certainly. You know, the money that's generated here in terms of tourism isn't insignificant.
It seems like there's quite a few cards stacked against you in this fight, where you have, you know, a national government that looks like it's due to win re-election this year or next year, and you also have a pretty determined exploration companies with deep pockets and Chinese backers, and so. What do you see as a going forward? Obviously, things are happening on the North Island, where there's local iwi who are organizing themselves, working with different environmental activists, creating flotillas to actively sort of inhibit some of the exploration that's taking place. Do you see that sort of direct action taking place here?
Yeah, I do. I think if we end up down the track, if we end up at that place, I certainly do. We've had Greenpeace contact us here. One of their national policy advisors contact us and offering their support to us, really. And their approach up there with Whānau Apanui is that if they can see someone, a company off of that sort of stature, then it sends a very strong message, really, to mining companies about, if you're going to come to New Zealand and want to mine here, they've got a fight on their hands. And I don't know, Grey Wolf and their Chinese backers, they may have deep pockets, but I don't know if they realise what they've bitten off here. We're just beginning to get underway in terms of gathering the community in behind us. I'm sure there'll be people in the community that would think this is a fantastic economic opportunity and would support what's going on. And I know that there's a lot of the community absolutely opposed to this. So we're certainly looking at working nationally with Greenpeace and their national approach. We've got a meeting next week with key people here in the Bay around, from environmental groups, just working out our strategy of how to activate our community and how to rally support, not just within Mohua, but nationally. If you think about what happened in Auckland, around the Schedule 4, mining in the Schedule 4 lands, 40 or 50,000 people are protesting up there in Queen Street, and the government backed down. And it'd be interesting to see what mainstream New Zealand really thinks about the government's approach.
That was Chris Hill from the local iwi sharing her thoughts on some of the difficulties that they're facing up against, as I say, a very determined Australian mining company that's looking for coal, oil, and natural gas. Very, very lucrative backers that have deep pockets that are prepared to back them financially into this endeavor, and a very acquiescent, or at least friendly, national government sort of telling them that, look, it's possible to get these kind of things approved. And so one of the things that I thought was interesting was how Chris was talking about how they actually sit down at the table and try to determine what exactly is sacred here, and they have to put an actual sort of place on a map, and rather than saying, look, it's the whole of the bay, not with coal trucks or coal ships coming in and out, that's what's sacred. But that doesn't really hold water. It's really they have to pick a point, and then 1 kilometre off that point, anything goes. And so we're looking at two fundamentally opposed kind of worldviews here, and it really sort of there's obviously a tension between what Mr. Lancaster said at the beginning of the program and some of the thoughts and feelings expressed by Chris Hill. So just to get a more of a government-wide perspective, I wanted to touch base with Mr. Kevin Haig. He's one of our Green MPs. He covers a lot of the area here in Golden Bay, and he's a very, very keen biker. He's going up into the Heaphy track hopefully this winter to try that out. But he shared his thoughts about they're starting to see quite a lot of applications coming through. Obviously, there's been indications through the national government saying we are open for business, and so with this volume of applications, he sort of talks about the genesis of this particular application.
There are new applications being received all the time for large parts of the New Zealand territorial waters, and in fact further out in the exclusive economic zone, sort of outside of our ordinary territorial waters. I think in terms of genesis, the thing that people need to understand is that oil and gas in particular are not exactly running out, but we're not discovering nearly as much as we use. So with oil, we use something like 5 barrels for every one that's discovered. And the discoveries now are happening more and more in more extreme places. So that's why the oil companies are interested in travelling large distances and looking at potential oil and gas supplies in deep water and in other places where it might otherwise be difficult to extract, because all of the places where it's easier to extract the oil and gas have been exhausted or are already being exploited. So that's why there's a big interest from the international oil and gas industries in looking at New Zealand. And I guess what's happened with this government, and look, the big companies were pursuing these interests under Labour as well, so it's not just the national government. But with this government, the welcome mat is well and truly out. The government's had this energy strategy for New Zealand, and their energy strategy is entirely about oil and gas, and I think that's so incredibly disappointing, because those are effectively sunset industries and sunset sources of energy, and what we really need to be doing is focusing on other sources. And this government actually is really completely disinterested in alternative sources of energy. The government has known about these applications, for quite some time. I'm not sure exactly how long, but the companies will have been exploring with government the kind of applications they wanted to put in. It's actually pretty scary when you go to the website for the Ministry for Economic Development to actually have a look at the areas around New Zealand for which companies have in fact staked out a claim to undertake exploration, because actually it covers most of the country and most of our waters also.
And when I spoke to the CEO of Grey Wolf this afternoon, this is the mining company associated with this application here in Golden Bay, he expressed a great deal of confidence in not just their application but in the whole project, and really expressed the fact that he would have never ever put forward this application under the Labour government. So obviously they've been given a very clear indication that their applications will be looked on very favourably.
I think that's definitely the nod in the wink from Jerry Brownlee and Hekia Parata, who's acting in Jerry's stead at the moment. You know, that they're the New Zealand equivalent of the drill baby drill. And what frustrates me so enormously is that their attitude is so out of kilter with the New Zealand public. I just can't understand how this government in fact can be so arrogant as to believe that it's okay for them to, as I say, roll out the welcome mat to companies like Grey Wolf when the New Zealand public is so adamantly opposed to this occurring.
But it seems to me a very sort of, not hypocritical, but at least there's a tension between John Key pushing tourism and pushing the Clean Green New Zealand image and really banking on that global brand, and then at the same time going to the very, very epicenter of that tourism industry, which is, Golden Bay is the heart of the parks in a lot of ways, and rolling out the welcome mat for a mining company or an exploration company. How do they reconcile that tension?
Yeah, I mean, our frustration is extreme, because what we see from this government is an incoherent economic strategy for New Zealand, in fact, because the entire New Zealand economy is really based on the fundamental principle of an intact natural environment, either directly through our tourism industry, for example, or indirectly through the fact that virtually everything that we sell on the world stage, whether it's dairy or meat or wool or clothing in the case of Icebreaker, actually we trade on that brand of 100% pure, clean, green New Zealand. And that's a brand that's already taken a bit of a knocking, or the beginnings of one, from the international press as if they see that actually maybe the reality doesn't quite measure up to that. Now, our response has simply got to be to actually improve our environmental performance so that we do actually meet that multi-billion-dollar brand, rather than the government's response, which is to take an action which will erode that brand further and destroy massive amounts of value in the New Zealand economy.
But how much is that actually going to erode the brand? I mean, we're looking at some oil drilling that's going to be, in some cases 12 miles offshore. They would say, and they have said, well, it's really not that big a deal.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not that big a deal for them who stand to profit from it, but actually for the people of the regions that are affected by this, so people in Golden Bay and in the Tasman region, just as it is for the people of Taranaki or the people of the Raukuma Ranges in Te Whanau Apanui, actually that is a big deal for them. I don't know if listeners to this program will have seen the graphics that were circulated at the time of the Deepwater Horizon oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico that showed the size of the oil slick that was generated from that spill. And that oil slick was massive, absolutely massive, extending much, much further than the distances that this drilling will be from the New Zealand coastline. So if something goes wrong in one of these drilling exercises, the consequences are absolutely catastrophic, not only for the region immediately next to them, in this case Golden Bay, but also for very large parts of New Zealand. Well, the interesting thing that we have been exposing in Parliament through an extended series of questions to the Minister is that, in fact, in the case of these oil drilling explorations, the government has no real plan from the company or their own plan for actually dealing with an oil spill should something like that occur. They haven't required any kind of bond. They have nothing like the workforce. So the New Zealand government has like 400 people who would be deployed in the event of an oil spill, and that compares to, 47,000 people who worked on Deepwater Horizon trying to contain it within the almost 3 months and who failed. And let's remember that in the case of Deepwater Horizon, the spill was only plugged in the end through a relief well, which provides, of course, another rig. Well, the nearest rig to New Zealand that could be deployed to actually assist us in that case would be literally months away. So what we're dealing with here is the kind of industry that will produce significant damage to our brand, and to something that New Zealanders think is pretty important, and which carries massive risks. Now, in return for that, in return for all of that risk, in fact, the profit from any oil well that was discovered would largely, in fact, evaporate overseas as well. So this is pretty much all downside for New Zealand, and definitely all downside for Golden Bay.
But what happens when you, as a member of Parliament, or the Green Party, or different members of Parliament, make this case, saying, "Look, we live in a seismically active part of the world. We have seen in the last few years that anything that can go wrong spectacularly, as we've seen with Fukushima." Well, how come nobody's making this case to, for instance, the members of the energy team, saying, "Gosh, maybe we better hold off on this deep water drilling for the time being"?
Yeah, your puzzlement that actually matches our own, because this is exactly the case that we have been making in the House of Parliament day after day, and the government's response is simply stonewalling. they appear to be completely uninterested in these issues, and I guess they have set their sights on this particular train of economic thought, that there's gold in oil, and now do not wish to acknowledge that the decision that they've made and the course that they've set this country on is a foolhardy one.
I mean, to be fair to the members of the government, we're looking at a huge economic impact that is still yet to be determined from the earthquake. We're looking at billions and billions of dollars that has to come from somewhere. Now, each one of these little deals that they keep on putting together is, $1 billion deal potentially. And if they only need a few of them, and they can maybe dig their way out of this hole, isn't this a sort of a way to, okay, it's unpleasant, there's some oil drilling, there's some environmental impact, and sure, there's risk, but isn't that better than the whole New Zealand economy going belly up?
The government uses those impacts on the New Zealand economy from things like the earthquake to justify pretty much anything that they want to do, and what they want to do is this series of ad hoc and incoherent actions, rather than actually engaging with the New Zealand public in strategy. So, for example, we have demonstrated that, in fact, a short-term levy on those New Zealanders who can afford to pay a little more, a small amount of borrowing over and above what the government's already doing, and reprioritisation of some of the government spending, bearing in mind that it's spending literally tens of billions of dollars on new roading, for example.
That was Kevin Haig speaking to us from Whanganui as he was travelling around his constituencies. He's the Member of Parliament with the Green Party, speaking to us in very candid terms as well about some of his own perplexity at dealing with these the fact that they stand in Parliament and they make the case and say, look, this is just too dangerous to be engaging in deep-sea drilling at this time. It's just too dangerous. There's so many things that can go wrong, and because we're so far away from the center of the oil world, so to speak, look at what happened in the Gulf of Mexico, where something went wrong, and they were only a couple hundred miles away from Houston, which, as anyone knows, is really the center of the oil world. In terms of technology and resources and skills and skilled personnel. Here we are on the other side of the world, and an oil rig would have to take several months in order to get here, in order to cap a well or to drill another well on top of it. So these sort of cases apparently are being made. You can rest assured that this is not just sort of us talking about this on the radio. This is actually being made in Parliament. But unfortunately, according to Kevin Haig, the national government, Jerry Brownlee and the energy team are not taking this kind of issue seriously. The priority here is clearly, let's get going and get some resources for the Crown, and let's really, really push some of these contracts through so that we can start to get some jobs and start to get some revenue. So I'm afraid I don't have time to bring you the final interview that I have. I'll just share with you some of the content of it. This is not an issue that is unique to Golden Bay or to our region. There is a whole series of different applications that are out there. The national government that's been in power for 2 years now has really made it clear that they're open to these kind of contracts, and as a result they've been flooded with international applications from different resource companies like Grey Wolf, and these applications are now in the sort of exploratory or even implementation stage. As I mentioned earlier in the program, there's a company called Petrobras, which is now in the beginning of its work off the East Cape, and the local iwi there have organized with a variety of different environmental groups, and most notably, which is Greenpeace. You can look up their activities on stopdeepseaoil.org. And that is a website devoted to informing you about the actions of their direct action, which is they've organized a flotilla of about 20 or 30 different boats that are actively going out and inhibiting, as I say, the progress of these multinational corporations as they try to take measurements and get information so that they can begin their exploration process. They are actively standing up, and they are actively fighting these multinational corporations. And I think that we can all take some solace in what Chris Hill said, that they're really know that this is very, very serious and that they are beginning to organize locally. So if anyone has any questions on how they can actually get involved, please contact Chris Hill here in Golden Bay, or I'm sure you'll hear more about this issue as time goes on. So this is, as I say, a very, very pressing issue that brings right into our front door here all the different themes of global economics, where we have a pristine environment. We've been trying to push tourism and trying to get people to come here to admire that, but now we're looking at multinationals coming here to try to get more oil out of our environment so that we can continue to keep the consumer machine going. So I'm Patrick Rose. This has been a presentation of Before the Flood, and I hope you have a great weekend, and please drop me an email if you need to get in touch at contact@beforetheflood.
Thanks to New Zealand On Air for making this program available through funding the Access Internet Radio project.